I must apologize to everyone. I could not procure any cream puffs on such short notice, so we'll have to make do with cream horns instead. They will have to suffice. I have to say, though, still very exquisite. I'm curious, though. I'm wondering how Mash himself would respond if he actually had to eat these things. Like, you go up to Mash and be like, sorry, man, we don't have any cream puffs today, but we do have cream horns. They're basically the same thing. I imagine Mash would still eat them. He would just be extraordinarily dejected at the prospect. He would just be like, oh, cream horns, huh? I really wanted cream puffs today. That's a real shame. He would still eat them. He would just be there like, they're okay, but they're no cream puffs. Welcome, everybody. Tekking and Barry here, back again to talk about, get ready for this, a brand new series! That's right, we're talking about MASHLE! We're finally doing the MASHLE video today! Are you pumped for this, Scorpy? Scorpy is my wizard familiar, a giant scorpion. I admit, not really standard. He's not an owl, or a dog, or a cat, or a mouse, or anything like that. But still, who's gonna mess with you when you got a giant scorpion familiar? I'm just saying, you know, if Harry Potter had a giant scorpion familiar at Hogwarts, Malfoy would have stopped at year one. You know, freaking Malfoy's making fun of Harry Potter, and then he just giant scorpion just scuttles up on Harry's shoulder and just stares at Malfoy, just. And then, you know, Harry's just like, oh no, it's fine, Malfoy. It's cool. No, it's good. He just walks away. And then later that night, Malfoy wakes up to that in his bed, like, and he's like, oh, no, I'm sorry, I'm never again. I'm like, just saying, giant scorpion, no one messes with you. Okay, so, MASHLE, alright, I'm imagining probably, I'm going to assume that more people in my audience have not read MASHLE than have read it. It's a relatively new series in Shounen Jump that's only up to about 30 chapters. If you just want my recommendation out of the gate, go and read it. You will have a fun time. Especially if you're a fan of, like, Harry Potter, which it takes huge references. It's basically a parody of that. It takes place at a wizarding school, and there's, like, a Dumbledore kind of figure, and even like the way each chapter is named is in reference to how every Harry Potter book is titled. So it's like Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. It'd be like chapter 75, Mash Van Dead and the Missing Cream Puff. Ooh. I should probably also address that really briefly. That's a translation thing. When I first started reading MASHLE on Viz, it was spelled Mash Vanaded, and then later on they changed it to Bernadette, which I think is the more correct one. But I liked Vanaded more. It sounded cool. Mash Vanaded. So there's that. So there's magic elements to it, and some aspects like similar to make One Punch Man. And there's also some Black Clover references thrown in there too, or at least similarities. Maybe not references, but a similarity I'll bring up with. So definitely really good. And just to give you like a really quick, I guess abridged version of the premise for those of you that have never read it. MASHLE is the story of magic, like I said, wizarding school. So, you know, people going around with magic powers and wands and everything, casting spells like Leviosa and all crap like that. But it also is a story about pumping iron, getting jacked. Yeah. So that's why it is, of course, called MASHLE, Magic with Muscles. I have to say, just the name itself, and like, just because I'm scrolling down Viz, right? You know, I'm scrolling down Viz, I'm looking at all the different manga they have to offer, and for months, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this image, MASHLE, Magic with Muscles, and I'm looking at that, and I see a kid wearing wizarding robes, and I see like a Dumbledore figure behind him with a wand and everything, and he's in the freaking foreground just curling a barbell, or dumbbell. I always confuse, no, barbell's like this, dumbbells, this is a dumbbell, right? This is a dumbbell, okay. Clearly, I have not read the series that much. Mash could definitely give me some tips on that, he definitely could. But I'm looking at the thumbnail there, and I'm like, okay, that looks ridiculous. So I have to read that at some point. I made a mental note. I'm like, at some point, I need to read that. I didn't really hear a lot of people talking about it. I didn't really, like every now and then there'd be a comment on one of my videos like, hey, you should check out MASHLE. But it wasn't like a big groundbreaking thing. I didn't really hear people like raving about it. Like, oh my god, this is the next big thing, right? So one day, just I'm doing nothing. I finally decide to sit down and I decide to read this story. And let me tell you, it's about up to like the 30 chapters right now, and I'm reading it on a weekly basis, every chapter has me laughing my ass off at least once. There's always at least one moment where something happens. Last chapter, I'm not going to spoil things that happen later on in the story, like where we're at right now. It's only like 30 chapters, so you should honestly be able to, catch up to it relatively quickly, but I'm still not going to spoil anything. But last chapter, also, I mean, it's an interesting premise, because much like One Punch Man, there are action scenes that happen that make you go like, whoa, damn, that was cool. And then there's comedy moments, like in One Punch Man, like with Saitama, that would make you laugh really loud and be like, oh my god, that's hilarious. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh, he said that. Oh, he did that, It's that kind of story. It really is that kind of story. So I would definitely go and suggest you check it out. But alright, so the premise of Mashal really briefly. Okay, so it takes place in a world much like Black Clover, where pretty much most people can cast magic. More often than not, there are more people that can cast magic than there are that cannot, okay? Our protagonist, Mash, cannot cast magic. Everybody in the world has this specific mark on their face that indicates that they can cast spells. They have it's not called mana, but you know what I mean. Like, they can cast magical spells. Even if it's like a rudimentary level, they have some degree of magic control, okay? Mash does not have one of these, okay? So he cannot cast spells at all. However, that doesn't really put him down too much, because Mash is not even really interested in casting spells. He's not even really interested in magic, honestly. He's just interested in pumping some iron. And so the first time we see him in the story, he's out in the middle of the woods, this serene little location. He's living with his adopted father, and he's just there in the woods, and all these little forest animals are around him. And then he's there. That's a barbell. That's definitely a barbell. He's there just like, 999, 998, wait, 999, 1,000, just pumping iron in the middle of the woods, this giant barbell. And then he just gets up and he's like, all right, that was a good workout. I'm gonna go eat some cream puffs now. Just prepare yourself for the cream puff thing. The cream puff thing is one of the many running gags in this story. It just happens every single chapter. So, and you know what? Running gags are an interesting thing. They really are. Because running gags, you'd be like, you hear a joke once, and it's like, okay, that was funny. And then you hear it a few more times, and then you realize what the author is doing. Like, oh, it's a running gag. Okay, I get it. And there's probably going to be a point in the story, maybe, where you kind of get tired of it, and you might just be sick of it for the rest of the story, or it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I get it now. This is a running gag in the most persistent form. This is a running gag that's literally gonna be here in every single chapter. So it's like you kind of get used to it to the point where it's like you're expecting it, but it gets twisted enough each and every time that it's like, it's funny whenever you see Mash walking down the dark, ominous hallway ready to beat down like the strongest wizards in the school or whatever. Is like, greetings, Mash. I am the user of the great destructor gravity magic or something. And Mash is just there with a freaking cream puff in his face, just like, oh, that's cool. It's just like you're expecting it. It's just like, oh, he eats cream puffs all the time. So it just makes it funnier as it goes. Like I said, it's a running gag in a way that might not be funny to everybody. You might get sick of it at a certain point. I'm just saying the author does it at least in a way that I'm entertained every time. So at this point in the story, I'm not sick of it, and it's like, I'm expecting this. There's going to be at least one oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna finish chewing this first. Hold on. So, okay, sorry about that. But anyway, it's a running gag that you expect, and there's a bunch of other ones in the story. This author really knows how to do running gags extraordinarily well. We'll get to another one later involving the doors. That's another one that's really funny, but yeah. Alright, so Mash can't cast magic, but he doesn't really care. He just cares about, muscles. He reads muscle magazines all the time, like bodybuilder magazines, because they have those in a magical universe. Hey, you know what? It draws an interesting perspective from this. It's just like, hey, just because you live in a magical, whimsical universe where, magic wands and familiars and magical creatures and dragons and all this stuff exist, all this crazy, wacky stuff exists, doesn't mean you have to be interested in it, right? You just be like, yeah, okay, I live in a magical society. I just want to be an accountant. I want to run my own sewing company. I want to make quilts for a living. Mash just really wants to get built, and he's not just doing it just like, whatever, I don't even care. No, he knows quite a bit about bodybuilding and stuff, and he knows, like, the names of all the muscles and the different training regimens you have to do for it and everything, so it's not really brought up that much in the story, but really, there could be a little segment at the end of every chapter where MASH teaches you a different exercise or something. That could happen, and it would make perfect sense in this story. Also, I believe that is what happens with the cream puff thing, okay? Because I am not, I don't really go to the gym that much, but I remember when I was working at the dollar store, there was this kind of like swole, muscular dude. He was like a bodybuilder, and he always came in, right? And so I got to know him over the years, and he would always buy, I remember he would buy pixie sticks a lot. And one day I just asked him, like, oh, you're fan of pixie sticks, and I forget what he explained it. I forget because it was years ago, but he basically told me that, like, okay, well, before you work out and after, you have to like have different kinds of like sugars or different kinds of like foods, and apparently pixie sticks worked really well for like something before or after working out. So it's like I understood that much. It's like, oh yeah, like sugar is actually very useful in that particular instance with like bodybuilding and stuff. So I think that's where it comes from for like the cream puff thing. Like after he works out, he's just like, that was a good workout, now I will have cream puff. And I think that's all MASH eats. I don't think there's ever been a moment where he's eaten anything other than a cream puff in this story. You can prove me wrong, but it's like every single time it's just cream puffs, cream puffs. You read this series enough, you will be dreaming about cream puffs, okay? They've been haunting me until I've made this video. All right. So anyway, very much like Black Clover, if you are born in this universe and do not have magical power, you're kind of looked down upon. However, it's even more extreme in this universe than in Black Clover. In Black Clover, if you... Oh, almost dropped my wand. In Black Clover, if you're born and you don't have really good magic or no magic, you're kind of just thrust down into, like, the Forsaken realm, like the dregs of society, like the poorest area of the country, and you're forced to live there. In the MASHLE universe, it's straight up spelled out in the first episode by, like, a magical police officer that it's like, no, if you are born in this world and you do not have a mark on your face indicating that you can cast magic, you are immediately to keep, like, the gene pool, like, just devoted to nobody but magic users, to keep it, like, just magic. So, yeah, that's dark as hell, right? Like, that's like, Jesus Christ, the first chapter you find this out. Like, man, that takes it to one step further, right? We also find out in the first chapter, it's like, it's a very, very religious kind of country they live in and everything. So there's definitely leading to way more darker things down the line. But it's kind of juxtaposed with this comedy and cream puffs and MASH, who was our protagonist that we follow throughout the story, which we haven't really gotten into, like, well, the story is definitely right now, it's in a dark place, like the person that MASH has to go up against and everybody, but I think it's going to get even worse than this as it goes on, just like the society itself that he has to go up against, okay? So, MASH lives with his adopted father, a man that hadn't really used magic that well his whole life, and he found MASH as a baby and just basically took him in, and he was raising him in secret, because he knew that if anybody ever found out about him and they didn't see the mark on his face, then he was going to be, you know, it's kind of funny because, like, when MASH finally gets admitted into the magic school, Easton Magical Academy, basically what they do to, like, as a cover, is they cast like a glamour spell on his face to give him a mark, and we see the mark here. It's basically like Harry Potter has, and I'm pretty sure that's what the reference is. Like, in the Harry Potter universe, Harry Potter is the only one that has, like, that special scar on his forehead, the lightning bolt scar. In this universe, it's an inverse. So everybody has a scar on their face indicating they can use magic except for MASH, who cannot. And then they use, like, an illusion spell to give him, like, a fake, like, mark on his face, like a lightning bolt one. It's kind of curious why they didn't do that earlier, because, like, in the first chapter, his father is just, his adopted dad is just like, you can't even go outside. If they go outside and they see you without a mark, then they're going to turn you in. And it's just like, okay, well then, like, literally, you know how easy it was for me to make this? Literally, just take out a marker and just, like, draw on his, it's like, okay, I'm good, and then just walk out. Like, no one will question you otherwise, you know, but whatever. MASH really doesn't care. You just get the idea that he really doesn't care about the society or its rules or anything. But he does care about his dad. He does care about his friends. He's not, like, completely apathetic to the entire world. He just, well, that's the thing. He is kind of apathetic to the entire world. It's only he cares about people that are more in, like, his close proximity in his world, okay? Like, in terms of, like, the religion or the Grand Magic Council, or, like, he doesn't give a shit about any of that, right? So anyway, magical police officer shows up and tries to fight against MASH using magic, and this is another thing that we're gonna get into in the story where, you know, he casts a magic spell, you know, just like, Reducto casts a spell, and MASH just kind of like, pfft, just bats the spell energy out of the freaking air, just like, BAM! Expelliarmus! Incendium! Avada Kedavra! It's just like, it's hilarious, okay? It's funny as hell. This happens a lot in the story, and every time it's not done the exact same way every time, where Mash just bats it out of the sky. He'll usually have to use like some other form of like, it's like, all right, so this time I'm gonna bust out my glutes magic, or triceps magic, or biceps magic, or abdominal magic. You know, he just calls it that because he has a sense of humor. He's very, very stoic most of the time, very much like Saitama in that regard, but he does have kind of like a dry sense of humor that you kind of cue up to relatively early on, right? Where he's just like, well, everybody else is going around talking about, like, I have gravity magic, and I have explosion magic, and I have light magic, or whatever. I have muscular magic, I have muscle magic. Let's just, power of glutes, behold my power, you know, just how it goes, right? So, that's kind of funny, because it's like he's in this magical Harry Potter universe where people are casting these incredibly powerful spells, and he can just like, nah, I just resist them with my muscles. And not always, he's not like invulnerable. He can bleed, he gets hurt, but he always manages to come out on top with the power of his muscles and just perseverance. I'm assuming the overall message here, one of the overall messages of the story, is like Mash is, you know, he wasn't gifted, of course, from the beginning. He had to work really hard. So this is kind of where it comes with the Black Clover references too, where Asta doesn't have magic, and so he works really hard and gets really buff. Kind of the same thing with Mash as well. It's just there's a little bit more humor in MASHLE than there is in Black Clover. But the references are definitely there, the similarities. So he beats down the magic police officer, and the police officer, this is all in the first chapter, and it sets up the premise very, very quickly, and in a way where it's just like, this is ridiculous, but it's just kind of like you go with it, because that's just the tone of the story. And the magical police officer is like, all right, well, let me strike you a deal. You know, I can't defeat you. You're pretty tough. But what about your adopted father? He's vulnerable. You know, we'll be chasing after you guys for the rest of your life. Unless, if you can join a magical academy, and you can become something called the Divine Visionary. Because apparently how this works, this is really messed up, and I don't know if they're going to go into greater detail on how this works, but apparently how this works in this series is, every year, there is an individual from a magical school that is selected to become the Divine Visionary, because the country is very religious. The Divine Visionary is like literally God-enlightened person. Like, God's chosen individual will rise to the challenge, and the status of Divine Visionary is like one of the most prominent figures in like all of the magic council in the entire world. So, to put this in perspective, you are like a high school student that's like the best at what you do. Like, you're the valedictorian of your high school, and you get selected to basically run part of the government. You know, that's basically how it works. Like, this happens every year. Every year, one of these God's chosen people are selected to rise to the status of Divine Visionary, get a seat on the Magic Council, work for like the highest authority in the land, you know, and you're still like in high school age at that point. It's just like, that doesn't seem broken at all, right? But it's kind of a messed up series, as we're already getting kind of learning about, right? So he's like, tell you what, you become the Divine Visionary. The officer is also interested in, like, you know, the money involved here, and if you become a Divine Visionary, you can basically set the rules. So you want to make sure your dad and you are safe, and we're not chasing after you all the time, then you can change the world. Is it a deal or not? And the deal is kind of stupid when you really think about it, but Mash is like, yeah, if the world doesn't like us to live and be the way we are, then I'll just smash it to pieces. And then Mash joins the Magical Academy, and that's kind of sets it on the premise for the story. Along the way, Mash meets a bunch of other schoolmates, of course, making up the principal cast. We got Lemon and Dot and Lance, to name a few. Their names are actually Lemon, Dot, and Lance, but yeah, okay. So anyway, Lance uses gravity magic, Lance Crown. He's really cool. He's one of the very rare two-lined users, so he has like 2 lines on his face, which indicates more magical capacity. So he's more of like a Todoroki, Bakugo, Sasuke kind of character, you know. Also a little bit of gauche in Lance, because he kind of has an obsession with his little sister. That's also a thing for his character. But anyway, yeah, he uses gravity magic. Dot is pretty funny. He is a character that basically shows up thinking he is the main character of the story. So like I said, a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more of a parody aspect here, where Dot shows up and he's like, I'm the main character of this series! And it's like, Mash is like, oh, okay, dude, that's neat. why are you talking about this like we're in a manga? You know, and so the funny thing is, of course, he's not the main character. Mash is the main character, but he thinks he's the main character. He uses explosion magic. Also, he has kind of a whole deal with him, like a sigil on his head that when he gets really pissed off during a fight, he turns into a battle demon. So that's a thing. Then there's Lemon, the main female lead, who definitely totally doesn't have a crush on Mash. Absolutely not at all. Didn't see that coming whatsoever. And there's also supporting cast. There's Wahlberg, who is the headmaster. He's the Dumbledore of the school, really powerful dude. There is a terrifying moment with him in the 3rd chapter when Mash is being accepted into the academy. One of the requirements is they had to go through a maze in order to, like, it's kind of like, honestly, like a scene in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, where in the Triwizard Tournament, they got to go through the maze, and there's like a sphinx and like a bunch of different creatures in the maze that have to, they have to challenge and defeat in order to pass and become members of the school, right? Well, Mash beats it the way that you could probably imagine him beating it, like, oh, I have to go through a maze. Okay. Bam! 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 Just punches walls out and just walks right through. Of course, punches out the Sphinx, doesn't give a shit. And then in the 3rd chapter, he's being interviewed by the headmaster. And the headmaster kind of goes through, like, why do you want to join our school? And he's like, to protect those that are close to me, like my father and everybody. And he's just like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. And he's going on and on about how he's like, oh, why did you, did you think that you could defeat the Sphinx? And he's like, even if I couldn't, I had to try it. He's like, why did you save that girl in the maze? I'm like, oh, because I felt like, I don't know, I'd regret it if I didn't, I guess. He just gives these very stoic, dry responses. And the headmaster's like, oh, okay, I see you have a good heart, but you don't understand that there are stronger people in this world than you. And so he creates this giant, like, really imposing magical spell where it's like a giant, like, with a bunch of mouths, basically about to drill into a voodoo doll. And the basis of the spell is that the person that Mash cares about the most, which is his father, his adopted father, is the voodoo doll and will be killed in the process. And it's a test on the headmaster's part. He's not actually trying to kill him, but he's like, what would you do in this situation? And Mash goes up to, like, this drill that's about to be drilled into the voodoo doll, this super spiky magical death drill. And Mash just, like, puts his hands under it, and it, like, pierces, it goes right through his hands. But he's, like, using his muscles. He's like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to see who's going to outlast it, your magic or my muscles. And then he cancels the spell, like, oh, sorry. Blood is just, like, gushing out of Mash's hands. He's like, oh, that was just a test, young man. Sorry for that. Yes, you're accepted into Easton Magical Academy. Welcome! So it's like, all right, yeah, he's terrifying. Yeah, we'll see where that's going, definitely. There's some overtures with Wahlberg that you're thinking, like, is he a good guy? Well, read the series and I guess you'll find out, right? But yeah, definitely Mash is not invulnerable. He's not like Saitama in that regard, where, like, no matter what, he never bleeds, and he does end up winning all the fights he's in, pretty much. But it's definitely done in such a way that you can tell, like, he takes damage. And it's a magical world, so at the end of the day, he can always be healed. Later on, he meets somebody in the story. I'm not going to go too much into this fight, because that's way later in the story. That's one of the more recent chapters. But there's a moment where they get into a fight, and then the character kind of warms up to Mash, and then gives him a rabbit handkerchief. And, like, this is a magical handkerchief. It'll heal all your wounds for the fights ahead. And Mash just looks at it and, like, oh, you're in the bunnies, huh? Whatever. And he just, like, uses it to heal him. It's like humor like that. I don't know, man. It just works for me. Maybe it might not work on you, but it works on me, definitely, okay? Much like OPM, One Punch Man, whenever Saitama fights, it's awesome, but it's also a lot of comedy elements to it. But then you have a whole other cast of characters, all the S-class heroes and everything, like Tatsumaki and Genos and Atomic Samurai. And when they get into a fight, yeah, there might be comedy elements there too, but when they get into a fight, it's much more serious, much more dramatic. And that's kind of how it is here with, like, the supporting cast. So Lance, who uses gravity magic, the spell he uses is Gravioli. So the spells have names like that, and I love it. I love it. It's like, gravioli, give me the coinioli. Yeah. So it's kind of that kind of humor. It's great. And so Lance has to fight against somebody that can use mud magic. And so his gravity magic, the mud just basically, it's like, oh, you can't crush me because I can use mud. And so those are really interesting fights because they're not really focused on comedy so much. They're focused more on like, all right, this is a character that can use gravity magic. How is he going to use this to his advantage to defeat somebody that seemingly has the upper hand? Then you get Dot, who has the exploding magic, and he has to have his own fight to grow and learn and, use the magic sigil on his forehead and everything like that. So there's a lot of scenes like that where it's like when it's not a MASH fight, it's really dramatic, very tactical, a lot of times trying to figure out how everything works using magic. But then when it comes to MASH, it's usually the opponent being dumbfounded by, like, this guy's not even using magic and he's kicking my ass. So they have to have a moment where they kind of come to terms with that, like, all right, I've trained for like 20 years to learn spells, and I can cast like abilities to increase my speed, and I can use gravity and lightning, and I can do all these crazy spells, and now this guy that just lifts weights a lot can freaking defeat me. Gotta have to accept that, all right, and then back to the fight, and then MASH ends up winning. Usually in a really either humorous / dramatic, sometimes both. Sometimes it can be hilarious, but also like, damn, that kind of stuff, all right? Am I making any sense here? Maybe not, but it's one of those things you really just got to check out the story to really understand. Let's see here. What else? Okay, so I talked about the side characters a little bit. There's really, like I said, it's only 30 chapters into this story, so there's not like, multiple story arcs I can really talk about. I could talk about some of my favorite gags in the stories. Let's talk about that. So there's one chapter where Lance is basically their upperclassman. He's a second year, I believe. He's like a really talented second year, okay? So there's a chapter where Lance is trying to teach the other students, like MASH. There's also another student named Finney. I forgot to mention him, but he's like MASH is like Ron Weasley. He's like his best friend. And so there's a chapter where they're trying to learn how to make a specific potion out of mandrakes. So, it's like pull the mandrake out, then you got to cut this, do this, blah, 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 and you got to make a special potion or like a special like, food to like cure illnesses and stuff. MASH tries to do it, and he makes a cream puff. So he takes this, like a freaking mandrake, like from Chamber of Secrets. He takes it out, and he's just like, he cuts it up, does all this stuff, and he makes a cream puff somehow out of it. And they're like, how did you make a cream puff? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, hold on. I'll do one with you. Okay, so Lance is right next to MASH. He's like, all right, pull out the mandrake root. Okay, now cut it up. All right, now take some Eye of Newt. All right, put that in there. Okay, stir the pot. Okay, good. Heat it at 350 degrees. All right, cool. Get some lizard tail. Throw that in there. Okay, rat tail. Okay, good. All right, and it's a cream puff. It's just like, they're going step by step by step. Next panel, cream puff. It's funny. I find it funny. I'm sorry. It's hilarious. That freaking had me rolling on the floor for a while after that. That was hilarious. There's the door. All right, I'll lead it off on door. That's a great reference. All right. So, like, the same thing with the cream puff thing. I mean, the cream puff thing is literally like every chapter, but the door thing is hilarious. MASH is super strong. He's super buff, all right? Every time he tries to open a door, he doesn't know if it's a push door or a pull door, so he always ends up breaking the door. Like in the first chapter, his adoptive dad is just sitting in the cabin like, I'm an old man just living here in peace and quiet. I live the simple life. No stress whatsoever. And then MASH just, boom, just breaks open the door. Oh, sorry, Dad, I forgot about the door. He's like, damn it, MASH. Okay, whatever. He's like, wait, hold on, I can fix it. Bam, bam. It's like, stop, please. Every time MASH tries to go through a door, he breaks the door. It's a running gag. You think it wouldn't be that funny if it kept happening, but the way the mangaka spins this is the first time you see someone do that, like if you're just chilling out in your dorm at Hogwarts, of course, and then all of a sudden the door just breaks open. He's like, oh, sorry, I thought it was a push door. It's like, whatever, like you'd freak out, you'd scream, be like, then probably the second or third time that happened too, but like the 17th time it happened, at some point you just get to this moment in the story where everybody just has a nonplussed reaction to MASH breaking down doors. It's just like, that's just what he does. He just breaks down doors. And so it's just like, break, and just like, oh, hey, MASH, what's up? Want to play some checkers? There was one of the later chapters, this isn't a spoiler, it's just MASH is going to confront the main enemy of the arc. all right? And then he goes up to the door, breaks it open, and he's like, sorry, I knocked. But he knocked so hard, it, like, knocked this giant metal, like, 2-story door off of its hinges into the dark secret room where the bad guy is hiding. And he's like, can you go into any room without breaking a door down? And he just says it in such, like, a nonplussed, like, whatever, let's fight. It's just like he does. I like that kind of shit. I don't know. It's great. All right. That's MASHLE. Like, I don't know if I did a really good job of summing up the story. There's more to it than this, absolutely, but I would definitely recommend getting into it. Go and read it. I just thought of another really good I could just keep going on and on, just listing off my favorite gags in this story, and also my favorite fights as well that are really good. Dot's fight with, when Dot was first introduced, so Dot and Mash up against, what was that character's name? Silva, that fight. That was a good one, too. The endurance test, that was a really good one, too. I mentioned pretty much everybody else in the story. I don't want to go too far ahead, so yeah, that's pretty much everything there. Oh no, I have to talk about the Quidditch shit. I have to talk about that. So, the equivalent to Quidditch in MASHLE, Magic and Muscles, is a sport called Duelo, and it's basically the same thing. There's a stadium, there's giant hoops on, giant poles in the middle of the stadium. You ride on broomsticks. It's all that kind of stuff. And so there's a chapter where Mash has to learn how to fly a broom because it's wizard school, and it's like time to learn how to fly a broom. And Mash is like, but I can't do that. And like that's how the chapter ends, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be hilarious. How's he going to do it? I'm so, like, I thought he was just gonna put, like, the broom, like, there, and then he was just gonna kick off from the ground so freaking hard, he just, and I believe he does do that later, but in the chapter, what he does, he takes his broom, chucks it like a javelin, and then he jumps so fast, he lands on the broom, and then flies. That's how he does it. It's like the scene in Dragon Ball when Mercenary Tao wants to travel, so he breaks the pillar, throws the pillar, and then jumps on top of it and travels that way. Basically what Mash does. He's like, I gotta fly this broom, huh? I gotta beat you in a race? Alright. And then just jumps on it, and then he wins. It's great. It's freaking great. And all the while, Mash's expressions, the way he talks, it just works. So go check out MASHLE today. I'm glad I got a chance to finally talk about it. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if I'm going to keep on talking about the story, like I'll do chapter reviews or whatever. This arc that we're in right now is kind of winding down. So we'll see. It's kind of like at the final confrontation right now. So we'll see where it goes. But I feel like this one, give it a few more months. I feel like this series is really going to pick up in a major way. There's already a lot of big fans of it out there, I've noticed. Whenever I said I'm going to talk about this, I got, not a lot of people, but quite a few people in the audience being like, yeah, MASHLE videos. So I'm super pumped. Are you pumped, Barry? Barry is a very rare quad line user. He's got 4 lines on his face, where most people just have the one, So yeah, this is Scorpy, Barry, and Tekking signing out. Go outside today, kids, and get yourself some cream puffs or cream horns, whatever is available at your local bakery. Bye, everyone.